My name is Dylan, and I haven't stepped foot in an abandoned place since that night. It was supposed to be a joke. Just me, my friends Olivia, Marcus, and Tyler, killing time on a summer night. We were driving around when Marcus brought it up the old playground on the east side of town. I heard if you go there at night, you can still hear the kids playing, he said, grinning. Dude, that place has been abandoned for years, Tyler scoffed. It's just a bunch of rusted swings. Exactly, Marcus pressed. So why are people still hearing laughter? We should have turned around right then. The playground was tucked behind a grove of dead trees, hidden from the road. The moment we stepped out of the car, I felt that the air was too still. No wind, no crickets, just silence. The equipment stood frozen in time. A merry-go-round covered in rust, a row of empty swings, a slide so worn it barely held together. And in the center of it all was the carousel. Peeling paint, missing horses. The platform tilted slightly to one side, as if sinking into the earth. But what caught my attention was the sign above it, barely hanging on by a single nail. No playing. After dark. Creepy, Olivia muttered. You think it still works? Marcus didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the carousel and gave it a push. It groaned, metal screeching against metal as it started to spin, and then we heard it laughter, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Did you hear that? Tyler whispered. We turned, expecting to see someone behind us, but we were alone. Then the swings started moving, not swaying with the wind. There was no wind. They moved as if someone was sitting in them, pushing off the ground. The chains creaked in slow, rhythmic squeaks. The laughter grew louder. Olivia grabbed my arm. Dylan, let's go. Then Marcus screamed. We spun around. He was on the carousel, but something was wrong. He wasn't pushing it anymore. It was spinning on its own. Faster, faster. Marcus clung to the metal bars, his face pale, terror in his eyes. I can't get off. We ran to grab him, but the second our hands touched the carousel, the laughter stopped. Everything was silent again, and Marcus was gone. The carousel slowed to a stop, empty, nothing but the sound of our own ragged breathing. We searched the entire playground. Marcus was nowhere. No footprints, no sign that he had ever been there at all. Tyler cursed under his breath, pulling out his phone to call the cops. No signal. Let's just get to the car, Olivia cried. We bolted, sprinting for the road. But when we reached the car, Marcus was there, standing perfectly still. Marcus, I gasped. Where the hell did you go? He didn't answer. He just smiled, a slow, unnatural grin stretching too wide across his face. Then, in a voice that wasn't his own, he whispered, "No playing after dark." The next thing I remember, we were driving away, speeding down the road. No one spoke. No one looked back. The next day, Marcus was gone. His house was empty. His parents swore they never had a son named Marcus. The only proof he ever existed was a missing person poster that was no longer there. But sometimes, when I pass by that abandoned playground, I see a figure sitting on the carousel, and when it starts to spin, I hear him laughing. My name is Ethan, and I don't go hiking anymore. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway, just me, my girlfriend Sarah, and our friends Mason and Lily. We wanted to escape the city for a while, breathe fresh air, sit by a campfire. Mason picked the spot. Black Hollow Forest. A bit remote, but peaceful. Or so we thought. The first day was fine. We set up camp near a stream, roasted marshmallows, told dumb ghost stories. But that night, something changed. It started with a noise. A distant, rhythmic knocking that echoed through the trees. 3 knocks, then silence. Lily laughed nervously. Maybe it's just a woodpecker. Sarah frowned. At this hour, the second night, we found the cabin. We had wandered deeper into the woods, looking for a good hiking trail. when we spotted it, a small wooden cabin, barely visible between the trees. It wasn't on any map. No roads led to it. "Let's check it out," Mason said. Everything about it felt wrong. The windows were boarded up. The wood was old, gray, and splintered, as if it had been there for centuries. There was no path leading up to it, just trees. Then we saw the door, wide open. "Someone could be living here," I warned. "We should leave." But Mason had already stepped inside. The air was thick, stale, too still. Dust floated in the weak sunlight that streamed through the cracks in the walls. Inside, there was nothing, no furniture, no belongings, just a single wooden chair in the center of the room, and the walls. They were covered in scratch marks, deep, desperate gouges that ran from the floor to the ceiling. Then we heard it, the knocking. 3 knocks. This time, from inside the cabin. We spun around, but the doorway was empty. The forest beyond was silent, the trees swaying as if whispering among themselves. Mason swallowed hard. "Let's get out of here," he muttered. We ran. We didn't stop until we reached camp, panting, hearts hammering in our chests. That night, none of us slept, because at exactly 3 a.m., the knocking returned. 3 knocks on our tent. Mason unzipped the tent just an inch, shining his flashlight outside. There was no one there, but in the dirt just beyond our tent, footprints led from the cabin and stopped right at the entrance. The next morning, we packed up and left. As we drove away, I glanced back at the tree line, half expecting to see the cabin watching us, but it wasn't there, as if it had never existed at all. My name is Alex, and I should have never gone near that factory. It started as a stupid adventure, one last thrill before we all went our separate ways for college. My friends in Eliam, Jenna, and Christy decided to explore the old Blackridge steel factory, abandoned for over 50 years. It had a reputation. Workers had gone missing back when it was still running, and one day, the entire crew on the night shift disappeared without a trace. No bodies, no evidence, just gone. We laughed it off. Urban legends, right? The factory loomed in the distance as we approached, its skeletal remains swallowed by rust and decay. The air smelled of damp metal and something stale, like the scent of old machinery left to rot. The front gates were chained shut, but Liam found a hole in the fence. "Told you it'd be easy," he grinned. The inside was worse than I expected. Conveyor belts frozen in time, shattered glass crunching beneath our feet. Graffiti covered the walls, but there was something strange about its warnings. "Turn back," they never left. "It watches." Jenna shivered. "Guys, maybe we shouldn't be here." Chris chuckled, shaking his head. "Come on, it's just some edgy kids messing around." Then the lights flickered. I thought it was a trick of the eye. There was no way the factory still had power. But the long-dead overhead lights buzzed weakly, casting sickly, uneven glows across the rusted machinery. Then we heard it. A metal clang, like something had just shifted in the darkness ahead. Liam whispered, "Did you hear that?" We turned a corner, and there it was, a doorway that hadn't been there before. It was embedded in the back wall, a heavy steel door slightly ajar, revealing only blackness beyond. The nameplate above it was rusted, the words unreadable. Every instinct in my body screamed to leave. But Liam, being Liam, pushed the door open wider. "Holy shit," he breathed. Inside was a perfectly preserved control room. Unlike the rest of the factory, there was no dust, no signs of decay. Screens lined the walls, flickering with static. Dials and switches remained untouched, as if someone had been here just moments before. Then, the screens changed. One by one, they lit up, displaying grainy black and white security footage of us from behind. I spun around, nothing was there. Then, Chris screamed. I turned just in time to see him being dragged through the doorway. The steel door slammed shut behind him. We ran to it, yanking at the handle, pounding on the metal. Chris. The factory rumbled. The lights flickered wildly. Then, silence. The door swung open. The room was empty. The monitors were blank. The switches were covered in rust, like it had been abandoned for decades. Chris was gone. We ran. We didn't stop until we were back in Liam's car, speeding down the highway, the factory shrinking in the rearview mirror. The next day, we reported Chris missing. The police searched the factory. They found nothing. No control room. No steel door. No sign that Chris had ever been there. But sometimes, when my TV glitches out late at night, I swear, I see him standing in the static, watching. My name is Carter, and last summer, my friends and I made the mistake of staying at an abandoned motel on the outskirts of town. It was supposed to be a joke, a fun night of ghost stories and cheap thrills. Instead, it turned into something none of us could explain. The Sunset Pines Motel had been closed for over a decade. The locals said it was because of a murderer guest who checked in and was never seen again. The owner vanished the same night. After that, no one dared to reopen the place. My friend Jake found it on some urban exploration forum, and before I knew it, we were on our way. The building loomed in the moonlight, its faded neon sign buzzing faintly despite the years of neglect. Most of the windows were broken, and the front desk was covered in a thick layer of dust. The key rack still hung on the wall, most of the keys missing, except for one. Room 109. Jake grabbed it with a grin. Looks like we found our room. We laughed it off, pushing away the creeping unease, settling in our chests. The door to 109 groaned open, revealing a room frozen in time-faded floral wallpaper, a stained mattress, a flickering lamp that shouldn't have been working. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic. Creepy as hell, Megan muttered. That's why we're here, Jake shot back, tossing his bag onto the bed. The night started off as expected. We cracked open beers, told scary stories, dared each other to walk the empty halls. But as the hours passed, something changed. The temperature dropped. The air became heavy. Then, the TV turned on by itself. The screen was filled with static, the speakers crackling with white noise. Then, the picture shifted. It was security footage of our room. The grainy image showed us sitting on the bed, staring at the screen in horror. But there was something wrong. There was someone else in the room with us. A tall, gaunt figure stood in the far corner watching. Its face was obscured by shadows, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally. The static grew louder, warping into something that almost sounded like breathing. Then the screen cut to black. We need to go. Now. My voice shook as I scrambled to grab my things. Jake hesitated, laughing nervously. Guys, it's just a prank then. The bathroom door creaked open. No one had gone in there all night. A low wheezing sound filled the room. A shadow stretched across the floor, moving toward us, but nothing was casting it. Megan screamed. I grabbed her hand and bolted for the door. Jake was right behind us until he wasn't. We turned just in time to see him being pulled back into the dark. The door slammed shut behind him. We pounded on it, screaming his name. Silence. Then, the TV flickered back on. The footage showed Jake, alone in the room, staring at the camera with wide, empty eyes. Then, he smiled. The screen cut to black. The room door swung open. Jake was gone. We ran. We didn't stop until we reached the car, speeding away without looking back. The next morning, we called the cops. They found no sign of Jake. But in room 109, the TV was still on, static hissing through the speakers. And on the dusty floor, scratched into the wood, were the words, "Stay the night." My name is Josh, and I've always had a thing for urban exploration. Abandoned buildings, forgotten places, the eerie silence of places left behind. It all fascinated me. But after what happened last summer, I don't explore anymore. It started as it dare. My friends and I, Emily, Ryan, and Jesty, decided to check out an old asylum on the edge of town. Blackwood Asylum had been shut down for decades, its history filled with rumors of mistreatment and disappearances. People said that patients never really left, that their screams could still be heard at night. We laughed it off. Ghost stories didn't scare us. The asylum was massive, looming in the moonlight, its windows shattered, vines creeping through the cracks in the brickwork. The rusted front gate hung open, almost inviting us in. We stepped inside, our flashlights barely cutting through the dust-choked air. The smell of mildew and something rotten hit us immediately. Creepy as hell, Jess muttered. Ryan grinned. That's the point. We made our way through the main hall, past overturned wheelchairs and rusted gurneys. The walls were lined with peeling patient records, yellowed with age. As we moved deeper into the asylum, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Then we heard it. A soft, rustling sound. Footsteps, light, deliberate, just around the corner. We froze. No one was supposed to be here, Emily whispered. Did you hear that? Before anyone could answer, Ryan did what he always did. He ran toward the noise. Dude, don't, I started, but he was already gone. The rest of us exchanged nervous glances before following him. We turned a corner and saw a long hallway stretching into darkness. Ryan was standing at the end, facing an open doorway. There's something in here, he whispered. A chill crawled up my spine. We stepped closer, peering into the room. It looked like an old therapy ward beds, with rusted restraints, broken mirrors lining the walls, and in the center of the room stood a chair, its leather straps still fastened, as if waiting for its next patient. Then the door slammed shut. Emily screamed. Jess grabbed the handle and yanked, but it wouldn't budge. Ryan pounded on the door from the inside. Guys, get me out. We threw our weight against it, but it was like the door had fused to the frame. Then, behind us, a voice whispered, "Leave." My blood ran cold. We turned. The chair was no longer empty. A figure sat in it now, head tilted unnaturally, its hollow eyes locked onto us, its mouth twisted into a grin that stretched too wide. Jess yanked on the door handle, sobbing. "Please, please," Ryan screamed from inside the room. His flashlight flickered wildly, shadows stretching unnaturally against the walls. The figure stood up, then everything went dark. The next thing I remember, we were outside, gasping, trembling. The asylum behind us stood silent, undisturbed, as if it had never let us in. But Ryan was gone. We called the police. They searched the building. No sign of him, no footprints, no belongings, nothing, like he had never existed. A week later, I got a text from his number, one word, "Help." I didn't respond. I still hear him sometimes. When the night is too quiet, when the wind brushes against my window, I hear his voice begging, and I know if I ever go back, I won't come out either.